Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
Hello and welcome to Lost in Science. My word, we have a spiffing show for you today.
Dear.
Yes, my name is Chris, and all seriousness, I suppose, today I will be talking about a recent announcement from the Australian government that they're going to set up a new space agency.
Ooh.
Yes, it's pretty exciting. Most people would say that it is quite long overdue. But what you may not realise is Australia has actually been in space before. Well, not the whole continent.
Not all of us. Although we
us.
are kind of in space all the time, really.
We've got to distinguish somehow.
Leaving the Earth's atmosphere, put it that way.
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to look at the Australia's history in space.
Cool.
And, what we've done and, I suppose, what it will mean for us to go back into space. Manisha, what do you got going on?
Hey everyone. So today I have this really cool story that's actually out of Finland. It's about the owls in Finland and how climate change is changing or how climate change could be driving a change in their plumage and how they are maybe even evolving as we watch.
So you're saying the owls are not what they seem?
The owls are not what they seem.
All right then. Well, on with our program. At the recent 68th International Astronautical Congress in Adelaide, the Australian government announced that it would be establishing an Australian space agency. Ooh. Yes, it does seem a little bit overdue.
What's it going to be called? ASA?
I don't know actually what it's going to be called. But it's interesting because out of the OECD countries, only 2 of them don't have a space program.
Who's the other?
Iceland.
Ah.
Even New Zealand has a space agency.
Is that because if they lifted off rockets in Iceland, the whole place would melt?
Quite possibly. I think so, yeah. Also, they have the elves won't let them.
Oh, yeah, could be.
Yeah.
Also, they're so close to Europe. Couldn't they just use the Europe Space Agency to lift off their stuff?
Yes. Well, possibly. I mean, well, actually, no, that's interesting because we'll get into the European Space Organisation a bit later on in this story. Because there is a story. Because what might seem surprising that a country like Australia does not have a space program because, we would seem to be fairly big. We have good geography for it.
Yeah, there's a lot of room. There must be one kicking around out there somewhere.
Yeah. But the thing is, we did used to have a space program. We just shut it down. So it all began in the 40s. I think it was first established, but I think the first launches took place in the 50s. And it was, no surprise, a joint operation with the British, who loved to go and blow things up in the Australian desert on various people's traditional lands.
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, there was various people's traditional lands in Britain as well, but there was a lot more people around in Britain that they might have disturbed.
And the place where this took place, actually, probably no surprise, you probably heard of it, is Woomera in South Australia. So the first launches that they did in the 1950s, they were suborbital rocket launches. So they called them sounding rockets, where they just basically fire a rocket up into the upper atmosphere, which seems like, if you're wondering what's the point?
So they're almost like ballistic rockets, though.
Yeah, they are. They are kind of. But you can still, they still go quite high enough. You can send a lot of instruments up. You can do measurements of the upper atmosphere, of radiation, this kind of stuff. You can, make meteorological observations, this kind of stuff. So
did they make people think there was, unidentified flying objects?
I don't know. Quite possibly they did. Well, that's interesting, I guess, because now a lot of people send stuff up into high altitudes with balloons. Our balloon technology is improved enough, I guess, that we can send a lot of balloons up as well. But yeah, at the time it was these rockets was the thing. And this was kind of, as I said, a sort of a collaboration. First with the British, then with NASA. They came along. We got involved with NASA as well. We helped a lot with the tracking of their satellites and things that we're still doing today. So
I read the other day that Australia has the only tracking station that's still tracking Voyager 2, I think.
Does it?
Yeah. Everyone else just doesn't bother looking at Voyager 2 anymore, but we've got one.
Well, we're pretty...
It points at Voyager 2 and says, hey, you're still there.
We don't have much else going on.
No.
But no, I mean, actually, I have visited the deep space tracking station near Canberra. Cool. Tidbinbilla, I think it is, near Canberra.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's pretty cool. They have big dishes. They point to the various spacecraft that are out there. We helped watch Cassini's last moments as well. And of course, famously, it wasn't always the dishes were there at Canberra. They used to be at parks where they watched the landing on the moon landing, as seen in the movie The Dish. But yeah, so a lot of this was activity helping these other countries do their stuff. But we actually did launch our own satellite in 1967. It was just the one. As far as I can figure out, it's just the one that we've actually launched.
Must be pretty old. Is it still up there?
No. It was the WRE sat. It wasn't our rocket. The satellite was ours, but it used an American rocket. And the WRE stood for Weapons Research Establishment Satellite. So it was basically a small satellite just to, I guess, measure the capability. It had some instruments on there. And it launched in 1967, 29th of November, and Australia became the fourth country in the world to launch its own satellite from its own territory. Which is, so, we might seem like a lagging behind, but in a way we were one of the leaders then. So
way out in front of the pack.
Yeah. So it was a American rocket that sent it up. It came back, re-entered the Atlantic Ocean west of Ireland on the 10th of January 1968. So it was up there for a bit.
Lucky, because you wouldn't want to enter the Atlantic Ocean east of Ireland, because
no. There isn't.
You'd hit a lot of people if you did that.
So it completed 642 orbits. 73 of those orbits it actually was able to transmit useful data. So it did some stuff. It was basically just mostly just measuring the upper atmosphere and trialing the technology, I guess, and demonstrating our capability. But so that was 1967, and there wasn't really much after that. I tried to find a list of all the Australian satellites. Apart from WRESat, there was another one that was called Oscar 5, also known as Australis, I think was launched by an American rocket in the United States. It was actually kind of an amateur construction that they managed to get some space on a rocket to be sent up. Then in the 1980s, there were the AusSat satellites, which are communications satellites. I remember I was looking up this and I saw what they looked like, and I remember that I had a little paper model of one that I got out of some sort of magazine or something back in the 80s, some sort of promotional thing, and it looked very familiar. Were
they financed by the government, or were they privately funded, the AusSat?
They were, I believe they were government funded ones. Yeah, because we did actually have a space agency at that point, a space program to a certain extent. Look, it's a bit of a complicated thing, I suppose. So we had obviously these first steps into space, but the cost of having a full space program was always kind of seemed quite high. Even though we had a lot of opportunities, like the European Space Organisation sent us plenty of invitations to join them, and we did actually launch some European rockets from Australia as well, some Italian ones and this sort of thing, and so this kind of carried on a little bit into the 1980s. I think there actually was the Australian Space Office was set up in the 1980s when they tried to get a bit more effort to build these other satellites, like the AusSat satellites that they sent up then. But that's pretty much all it did, and the sort of funding kept being wound back, and eventually it was terminated in 1996, the whole thing. So, it was a pretty kind of sad thing. Again, because it just seemed expensive and didn't seem to be worthwhile. So what we tend to do is, we do have a few other Australian-owned one that's been launched since then. But we mostly just use other countries' satellites for our purposes, which kind of puts us at the mercy of all kinds of different countries.
Well, and a lot of the communications that satellites used to be used for has been replaced by fibre optic cables. So we don't even, we used to get TV broadcast by satellite and things like that, which we don't really do anymore.
Oh, no, we still do, though, in some areas. Like, obviously, Australia being such a large country, there are remote areas where we do use it. Like, there are satellites called Sky Musters that are used for the NBN. and they're relatively new ones. And, of course, people complain about the expense of those. But the thing is that space is becoming more and more important. We are still using for communication a lot more, I guess, observation, a lot more sort of Earth observation done from satellites, a lot more kind of data and things that you can use. We're much more a data-based society.
Well, certainly like GPS and things like that, people use that pretty much on a daily basis.
Yeah. So one of the things I've been talking about with this launch of the Australian Space Agency is that there's the international space industry is worth about $420 billion at the moment. And so kind of like it's a big industry. And, this is a way of Australia trying to be part of that industry as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean launching our own satellites ourselves from our own rockets. It might just be building our own satellites and putting them up there. But the technology's improved, of course. The satellites have got a lot smaller instead of being like a big car-sized thing. Now the big fashion is things called CubeSats, which are about 10 centimetres on each side. So they're pretty small, and you can pack a lot into that little cube.
So I guess the advances in other computer technology and stuff mean that you don't have to build gigantic satellites to do the job anymore. Yeah,
and there are a lot of people around Australia who are working on these various CubeSats. So it's more a matter of, I guess, coordinating that activity, trying to have some sort of centralising of the technology involved in it so that everyone's not just doing the same thing and wasting a lot of money doing the same thing over and over again. Funding some of the work, I think, at a federal government level. That doesn't all have to be government funded, but also even just having the ability to be part of the space community, which we're not really at the moment. We're just kind of an outlier refusing to get involved. So it's good for us to be at least at the table. So it's interesting. We'll see what it all means. If you look at all the announcements, there's a lot of jargon there, a lot of government things about it's all increasing our capability and jobs and growth and this kind of stuff. And what that actually means is in a practical sense, is not clear. I mean, we're not going to be putting people on the moon or anything like that. There won't be like an Australian base on the moon. But space is an important part of the modern world. We are still in the space age, and Australia needs to be part of it.
Nice.
Satellites, sad satellites, invisible are the chains of orbit, but I will be your burning satellites. Satellite, satellite, spinning window of the night. I went away, went away, and just to see what you say. Invisible the chains of orbit, I would be your final satellite. All the children waiting to be born, still in the mire waiting to be formed. The streets are full of hungry hearts, waiting for the moment to be a star. Invisible the chains of orbit, I would be a burning sunlight. Life, precious love, precious love. children laugh as you go forth. Invisible the chains of orbits, I will be a burning satellite.
That was Satellites by Yellingbow, and you are on the Community Radio Network.
Hi everyone, this is Manisha, and you're listening to Lost in Science. So, survival of the fittest. We all know about this concept, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a trait, and it makes you, or an individual, more capable or able to survive in a certain time point. You can breed, pass on your genes, and fantastic, the population has your genes. If you don't have these good genes, or you can't get a mate, you don't breed, and you don't pass on your genes, and so that gene will probably get filtered out of a population. Yeah.
Or at least reduce in frequency.
Reduce in frequency, yeah. Be less and less common. And that's how populations evolve. And if we talk about this on a small time step, so if we think about what we think of with evolution, that's sort of known as macroevolution, like a big timescale evolution, the whole like fish to human evolution thing, bacteria to human thing.
Or even like, one species changing into a different species.
Yeah, exactly. But microevolution is the same concept, just on a smaller time scale. So when we're looking at changes within a population over some generation times. So you can actually watch different species adapt to a challenge in their environment.
I guess a famous example is moths in the UK.
In the UK during the industrial era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ones that they were white moths that used to be on white trees, and then when the soot made the bark black, then the moths started getting darker colours.
Yeah, so the moths themselves weren't actually changing in color because the trees were darker, but the lighter moths, in contrast to the darker trees, were easier to be picked off, and so there were fewer of those individuals passing along their genes because they were getting eaten maybe before they were able to, before they were able to mate and pass on their genes. But then maybe the darker moths were surviving better, and so they had more of a chance to have more
reproduce. Yeah,
but then the light genes would still be there. So when pollution is improved, then presumably the white ones would come back.
Yeah, if the lighter color is then all of a sudden favored for whatever reason, if pollution improves and all of that. So these sorts of changes happen over time quite often, and it's actually quite interesting to evaluate the changes because we normally only see them after they've happened, or we only start to notice it after the fact. And when all of a sudden, there's no more white moths. Why could this possibly be happening? So my story is actually about a research group out of Finland that's actually watching this sort of a change happen in a population of tawny owls just outside of Helsinki. So tawny owls, they're sort of smaller owls. They're medium-sized according to owl ranges. They're about 500 grams. And they occur throughout temperate forests, mostly in Europe and in Asia. And they're very widespread and they're very abundant. So they're not of any sort of...
they're not endangered or anything like that.
No, exactly, yeah. They're not of any sort of concern in this way. So there are these massive, massive populations around. But something that's interesting is that now with climate change, over the last few years, over the last maybe 20 to 50 years, more and more researchers have been noticing changes in the population demographics. So like later reproduction times and shorter lifespans and things like that. So there seems to be some sort of a stress on these populations, even though it hasn't come out, or these sorts of stresses aren't putting the populations at risk just yet. So the researchers out of Finland, what they were looking at was the difference between two types of morphs in the same population. So these owls actually have a gray morph and a brown morph, and they both exist.
So what do you mean by a morph? Is it just a different
plumage? So their coloration is a bit different. So one type of tawny owl in this population tends to be a bit more gray, while the other type tends to be more brown. And so...
But they still interbreed with each other?
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So they're still the same species. It's just a different sort of... it's just a different display of their genes. So it's a different phenotype for the same genotype. So this study was carried out by Patrick Carroll and his colleagues at the University of Helsinki. And what they did was they actually analyzed a really massive data set. They had 28 years of data on 471 owls. And they had all sorts of data from genetic data to habitat data and the so when you're working with birds, you can ring birds so that you can identify them later. So you can basically give them a band with an identification number. So this long-standing data set can allow for you to say which birds are mating with one another. So tawny owls are monogamous, so you can follow breeding pairs. You can see who's had which chicks and which children and which one's grandparent and uncle and all of these things. And that allows you to really tell a lot about a population. It allows you to see how the genetics are playing out, how the genes are passing down throughout the population. And with this massive data set, not only were they able to look at how the generations are playing out, but they were able to also make correlations with how the environment was changing over the past 28 years. And so from their study, they found a few really interesting things about these morphs and about the tawny owls. First, the biggest finding, which I sort of glossed over, was that the morph coloration isn't just phenotypic plasticity. Whoa. So phenotypic plasticity is basically when you have a gene that can be expressed in a different way given your circumstance. So like if you we all have genes. Genes are like the coding to how we look and the things that happen in our body, the way that we look. So with phenotypic plasticity, I think the easiest way to think about it is with plants. So if you have two identical plants and you grow one in poor nutrient soil and another in pretty rich nutrient soil, it is likely that their root structure or their leaf characteristics will be different because of the fact that they're in different environmental situations. So it's the same plant, but they just look different. So the gene has the ability, or the genes in the plant have the ability to adapt according to the circumstance that they're in. And so in the situation in Finland with the tawny owl, they were able to show that the difference between the brown and the gray isn't just a phenotypic plasticity. So there isn't some sort of an environmental condition that is promoting that the owls have a certain type of plumage. Does that make sense?
So the owls aren't just spontaneously turning grey or brown because or something they're eating a different food. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So their expression isn't, the expression of this color isn't based on their environment. It's not. Okay. So it is. The researchers were able to demonstrate that it is a genetic thing. Okay. There's an allele controlling the color of their plumage. Yeah. And then over the course of the study, Patrick Carroll and his colleagues also found that this plumage coloration was shifting. So when they first started collecting their data back in the 80s, the population was 12% brown morphs and 88% gray morphs. And now it's up until recently, up until 2010, the population is now more even. So there's 42% brown and 58% gray. And they found that the change in the morphs, because it's not a phenotype type thing, it's not just another expression, it is a genetic thing. So it means that the brown owls are surviving better than the gray owls. And they were able to track this they were able to correlate this and analyze it according to the survival of owls over the winter, and compare it to compared to the temperatures and the average level of snowfall in Finland over these winters. And they noticed that, So lately Finland's been having more milder and less snowy winters. And so back when the winters were more snowy, the gray owls were probably favored because they could hide better over winter from
So the
predators.
grey gene was more selected in the...
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And they were able to blend into their surroundings. So this is like the moth example. So the gray owls were better suited for that surrounding. But now, because there's less snow, the brown owls are actually not as visible. And the brown owls are actually better at exploiting food resources. And so it's not that the gray owls are all of a sudden more visible and are being taken more. It's just that the brown owls are starting to blend in more, and because they're also better hunters and better at exploiting resources, their populations have been growing over the past little while.
So the grey owls have lost their advantage
Exactly.
from the snowy winters, and now the brown owls are taking over because they're better at hunting and stuff.
Yeah.
How now, brown owl?
Oh, geez.
As the saying goes, the old saying.
The old saying. And yeah, so now because of climate change, we're seeing this shift in morphologies, and the two morphs, or we're seeing this shift in these morphologies between the two morphs, and the trend will probably continue if we're not expecting a complete reversal of climate change anytime soon. And so if we continue to get milder winters in Finland, the brown owls will continue to be favored in this situation. So yeah, so it's really cool. It's a good example of watching evolution happen.
But for a bad reason.
For a bad reason, yeah. But evolution happens in the face of challenges, I suppose.
Okay, and that is it for another episode of Lost in Science. Lost in Science is, of course, recorded at the studios of 3CR in Melbourne and airs across Australia on the Community Radio Network. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us at lostinsci@gmail.com. That's LOSTINSCI@gmail.com. Or you can find us on Facebook. We are Lost in Science on 3CR. Or you can find us on Twitter. We are at Lost in Science 1. Or you can look up our podcast in your favourite podcasting app. If you do, please, if you get the chance, to give us a good rating and a review. Help other people find our podcast. Or you can find us on your radio station same time next week. And once again, Stu, Manisha, Claire and Chris will get
Lost in Science!
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.